Hoth, Arrakis, Endor. Each of these planets has a unique ecosystem to the planet and has one environment just for the whole planet. But Earth isn't like that. On Earth, we have beautiful deserts, rich forests, incredible mountains. Is science fiction right and that every other planet is just one environment and Earth is the unique one with having lots of different environments? Or is science fiction wrong? Let's take a look at that. The first place to start when looking at science fiction is things like Star Wars and Dune that are kind of the inspiration for a lot of other science fiction. They were written before we'd found any other planets outside of our solar system. We didn't really know that much about the planets within our own solar system at those points in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The first planet outside of our solar system wasn't found until 1992. And even then, we didn't know that much information about it. So this is still a relatively recent science and part of astrophysics. The other thing as well is in storytelling, we bend the truth a little bit, and sometimes it makes the story much easier to tell. So like when you look at Star Wars, it's much easier to tell if someone's on Hoth, if they're on Coruscant, if they're on Endor, and which part of the story you're telling based on the environments around them. Because it's very quickly to be like, okay, they're in a city that looks like this, they're here. If they're surrounded by ice, they're here. So let's go back to science fact and take a look at some of the planets in our solar system and see what we know about those around us. Let's start with the rocky planets, which are quite complicated and much weirder than you probably think they are. So if we take a look at Mars first, Mars is very different depending on where you are. Mars has deserts, it has wet parts, so there are parts where there's no rivers or lakes, although we think there used to be, but there are parts of it that there is some water in the soil, and there's other parts that are completely dry like a desert. So first of all, that depends on where you are. There are ice caps, there are mountains, and there are volcanoes. So we think that in the past, Mars had plate tectonics, the same as how Earth does. And with plate tectonics, when you have two plate tectonics meet, they kind of bump into each other and they'll push each other up and the lava will come up out the middle. Venus is where things start to get very weird. So Venus is very hot, has very high pressure. Most of Venus is rolling hills. So if you think of like going to the countryside and you see some like hills and dips, things that you can kind of walk over, that's what most of Venus is like. But Venus does also have volcanoes, but its volcanoes are different from what's on Earth and Mars. Venus has what's called pancake volcanoes. So on Earth, as I just told you, the same as on Mars, we have plate tectonics, they push up and they make a big high mountain and a volcano. Venus only has one single plate tectonic, whereas on Earth we have a whole bunch. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but we have a whole bunch generally lining up with the continents. Because Venus has one, it doesn't have an edge for multiple ones to push against each other. So instead, the way volcanoes work on Venus is there are weak spots in the plate itself, and the lava can kind of come up through. What happens is when the lava comes up, instead of just squirting up into the air like in a volcano on Earth, the pressure is so high on Venus that it kind of squishes the lava back down. And as it kind of comes up, it will then go out flat and it will make a pancake. So it makes a big circle around the kind of weak point in the plate tectonic. Then, because these volcanoes get so big and heavy, they also then cause the plate tectonic itself to dip slightly. The other weird one that Venus has is this thing called arachnoids, and these are kind of like lines over the planet in certain regions. We have no idea what these are or what caused them. Maybe they're the Venus version of crop circles, who knows? I will come back to Mercury in a minute, but that's obviously the other key rocky planet to kind of talk about. If we next go to the gas giants, so Jupiter and Saturn, things are different again. So first of all, it's not as obvious if you're on the planet because there's no surface, it's all just gas. So things would look the same pretty much depending on where you are. But as we can see when looking at the planets, they have these stripy sections where there's different gases present depending on the color of the stripes. So if you had life there, you could have different life in the different stripes depending on what gases are around and what they kind of thrive on. The other one as well is as you go deeper into the planets, the gas pressure would build up and it'd be kind of like going deeper into the ocean. So you could have different life, you could have different structures down there. But again, we have no idea what that's like because we can't get down there, it's just too high pressure. When you go to extreme distances in our solar system, you tend to see things get not as drastic. So again, we talk about Earth and Mars where things are very different depending on where you are on the planet. If you look at Mercury pretty much has two environments. So in the day, it's like plus 400 degrees, which means everything would be really dry, really hot, very dusty. At the night, it goes down to about minus 200, minus 100. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's very, very cold either way. So this means then the nighttime would be the exact opposite of the daytime, and you would have ice and other cold things. Which again, we'll talk about a bit more in a minute about a more extreme example of Mercury. When you get further out of the solar system, so you get to places like Pluto, things get weirder again. This is the thing about astronomy, everything can always get weirder than you think it can get. So Pluto is so cold that it has glaciers, we think. So it would be the same as like somewhere like Wales, where it would have these valleys once the glaciers melt. You know, you'd have all these like nice valleys, potentially rivers kind of running down the bottom of them. You'd need Pluto to defrost for that to be able to happen. Pluto also has volcanoes, but they are different again from Earth and Mars's plate tectonics ones, Venus's pancake ones. It has a third type of volcanoes that are called ice volcanoes. The official scientific word is cryovolcanoes. And these basically, instead of spitting out lava, they spit out ice because Pluto is just so cold. The other one as well is Pluto does have mountains. We've seen when Voyager and New Horizons went past, but at that distance, we're pretty sure the mountains are actually made of ice, not from rock. So maybe Elsa's been up there building her own ice palaces again. Okay, so we talked about our solar system, we talked about some weird things. You know, you see weird things in movies, but they always say that truth is stranger than fiction. So when you get outside of our solar system, things get even weirder again. So I'm going to have to read this one because I won't remember it. On HD 189773b, that's a planet, it rains glass. So on this planet, it's incredibly hot, it's about 1300 degrees. And there's silicon in the atmosphere, and at that temperature, the silicon would turn to glass, and then it would rain glass. So not somewhere you want to go for your holidays. 55 Cancri A, another planet, was in the news a couple of years ago because we think the planet might have diamonds on it, just kind of existing on the surface. There is a significant amount of carbon on this planet, and it's extremely high pressure and extremely high temperature. Carbon at high pressure and high temperature turns to diamonds. A more extreme version of Mercury is Kelt 9b. This is a planet that on the daytime is about 4,000 degrees Celsius. So what happens is all molecules and elements kind of get stripped away from each other and broken down completely. So if you have something like water that has two hydrogen and an oxygen, the bonds between them would break apart because it's just so hot they can't sustain that bond between each other. On Earth, when you break up hydrogen and oxygen from water, you get a single oxygen and two hydrogens that also bond together. And again, on this planet, that wouldn't be possible. So you'd have two hydrogens kind of floating around each other and then oxygen separately. Then what happens on this planet is the temperature drops significantly at night. So these molecules would come back together and you'd have water again. And it'd be this endless cycle over and over again of molecules forming and breaking, forming and breaking. So if you live there, you'd basically have to stay on the dark side and just keep going around as nighttime follows. Last one, you might have seen this one in the news a couple of weeks ago. There's a planet called KC18b, and it was in the news because it might have life on it. But it also has some really weird environments on it too. We're pretty sure this planet has liquid lakes and oceans on it, but because of the temperature and pressure, they might be completely different from lakes and rivers on Earth. So water has this really unique property where if you take liquid water, right, on Earth at 1 atmosphere of pressure, it exists as a liquid between about 0 degrees and 100 degrees. You know, if it gets cold on that, it turns to ice. If it's hot on that, it turns to steam. Pressure and temperature are dependent relationships. So if you increase one and decrease the other, you can then still have liquid water at different temperatures and pressures. So on this planet, because of the different pressures and temperatures from Earth, it's much higher. What you actually see is you can have liquid water and then on the surface it instantly turns to steam, whereas on Earth we don't have that. So what it means is if you went swimming, you would die when you try coming back up because the surface is just boiling steam. So not a good place to go for your holiday either. And we haven't even gotten to rogue planets. These are planets that don't have a star and they just kind of wander the universe and the galaxy on their own. Who knows what kind of weirdness they could have and what properties they might have. We have no idea because they're really hard to spot. But anyway, to answer the question, no, most planets don't have just one single environment. Science fiction does kind of simplify things for storytelling purposes and to make things more interesting. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might like my last video talking about how hard it is to farm in space and which planets are easier than others if you want to grow crops, and how much truth there is to the Martian. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.